Hello, everyone. Let's discuss this question from October-November 2024, variant 1-3. Now, this question that we have in front of us is again question number 5A, in fact, and this is a 4-mark question. The question reads, outline two assumptions of the learning approach in psychology. As I've mentioned earlier, pick up on the keyword here, look at the marks, and know what has to be done with this. Like I say, for a 4-mark question, when they're asking you to write down two assumptions, consider this as two separate questions of 2 marks each. Now, in this particular question, we have been asked to outline two assumptions of the learning approach in psychology. Now, as we speak about the learning approach we all know suggests that we are not born with fixed behaviors or traits. Instead, we all start as a blank slate. Now, what does the word blank slate over here mean? Meaning that everything we do and feel is shaped by our experiences, shaped by our interactions with others and the environment. For example, if I talk about a child isn't born knowing how to speak a language, but they learn by hearing and imitating others. This particular assumption focuses on observable changes in behavior. Now, as I talk about observable changes in behavior, this means that psychologists study that we can see rather than hidden mental processes. Now, psychologists are more interested in studying the things that are visible, that can be seen through human naked eye, instead of focusing on the hidden mental processes, such as the cognitive approach. Now, if I talk about this a little more, when we speak about the learning approach, there are three main processes that we all should know, should keep in mind when it comes to the learning approach. We all should know the distinction between classical conditioning, operant conditioning, or even social learning. Now, classical conditioning, let me remind you all, this is learning through association. Classical conditioning is learning through association. Remember, when I say classical conditioning typically involves involuntary behavior. For example, the study that was conducted by Ivan Pavlov, how Pavlov's dog learned to salivate at the sound of a bell because they associated the bell with food. Likewise, we could talk about operant conditioning. Now, operant conditioning is when you're learning through rewards and punishment. The word we use over here, the word that I typically use over here, is through reinforcement or reinforcement mechanisms. Now, when classical conditioning, for classical conditioning, I'd use the word involuntary behavior. Likewise, for operant conditioning, I'd like to use the word voluntary behavior, because you're learning through rewards and punishment, rewarding and punishing mechanism. For example, if a child gets praised for good behavior, they're more likely to repeat it. Now, once we're aware of classical conditioning and operant conditioning, and we know the distinction or the difference between classical conditioning and operant conditioning, let's talk about the social learning theory. We use the word social learning for the learning that is done by observing and imitating others. For example, if a child watches an older sibling being rewarded for tidying up, they're more likely to copy that behavior. So, in summary, the learning approach believes that our behaviors are shaped by experience, and we learn through association, rewards, and observation. Now, quickly having a look at what the examiner has put over here for us. We all begin our lives as a blank slate. Experiences and interactions with environment shape our behavior. These changes are directly observable. We learn through the processes of operant conditioning, classical conditioning, and social learning. Now, this is how you could score your first 2 marks, and this is how you could score your second 2 marks. That makes it a total of 4 marks. 4 out of 4. We're not missing a single mark here. Now, I always would advise you to read through, when you're going through the marking scheme, look at what you might have done, what you possibly could have done that might have led to you losing on marks. So learn what makes you lose marks and try avoiding that. Quickly hopping on to the second part of this question that says, explain explain how one finding from the study by Bandura et al. Aggression supports one of the assumptions you outlined in part A. So in a question of this sort, you need to know that you're expected to explain. This is a 2-mark question. You are expected to know one of the findings from the study, and you need to know it well enough so that you could link it to support one of the assumptions that you've already mentioned. For example, if I talk about the study that was conducted by Bandura, Ross, and Ross on aggression, if I talk about a particular finding from this particular study, we all should know that Bandura et al. They found that children who observed an adult acting aggressively towards a boba doll were more likely to imitate that aggressive behavior when later placed in a similar environment. These children, they showed more of physical, not only physical, more of physical and verbal aggression compared to the children who had observed a non-aggressive model or who did not observe a model at all. Now, the question that now this is the first mark that we're getting from this. Now, have a look at this real quick. You get the first mark for result or conclusion, and you get the second mark for linking it to an assumption explicitly. Now, taking this ahead, how does this result support the learning approach? Now, this particular result of finding supports the assumption that behavior is learned through social learning, specifically through observation and imitation. The children in the study did not need direct reinforcement, and they weren't really rewarded or punished to learn aggression. Instead, they simply copied what they saw and demonstrating observational learning, which is again a core idea in the social learning approach. In this particular study, that it also showed us that children were more likely to imitate aggression if they saw the model being rewarded, which supports the role of vicarious reinforcement too. Now, a model being rewarded, when we speak about the likelihood of imitating aggression, if you see the model being rewarded, how is it that the model was being rewarded over here? The model was uh, doing whatever the model wanted to do, and there was no repercussion to it. There was no punishment to it, right? So children were more likely to imitate aggressive behavior if they had seen an aggressive model compared to a non-aggressive model. This is how you're getting the first mark. Therefore, this supports the idea of social learning as they observed and imitated the behaviors. So if you, I'd suggest you should pick on out of these three, what do you call it, processes that are typically taught while teaching the learning approach, that is operant conditioning, classical conditioning, and social learning. I think you should pick on this point because this works on really well for this particular question. I hope this was helpful. Thank you.